Good evening, everyone. The David Carliner Award is given to a public interest attorney who has been practicing for 7 to 12 years and who demonstrates the tenacity and risk-taking of David Carliner. David Carliner, my grandfather, believed that if you won all the cases you took, you weren't fighting hard enough, and that the fight was worth having no matter the outcome. This year's winner exemplifies all of David Carliner's traits. One of the things that most impressed the judges when choosing Oren Nimni as the winner of this year's award is the variety of legal techniques he uses. Oren doesn't just engage in large impact litigation, or just organizing, or just community lawyering. As the litigation director of Rights Behind Bars, he does all of that and more on behalf of individual clients and organizations challenging conditions in prisons, jails, and immigration detention centers. And even though he loses just enough to know that he is on the edge of lawyering, he does his work incredibly successfully. Rights Behind Bars has concluded 58 appellate cases and remarkably won 42 of them. Their wins include getting courts to overturn qualified immunity, no mean feat at all, and a habeas class action on behalf of ICE detainees in a large detention site that led to freedom for dozens of prisoners, just as COVID was spreading through detention centers. They are currently fighting to get basic health rights in prisons and jails, and the basic human dignity that one shouldn't lose just because you are incarcerated. Please join me in congratulating Oren Nimni.
All right, I'll take a beat from Leah also that I'm a little bit nervous and a little bit insecure, but we're just gonna roll with it. Thank you so much for this award. It's truly an honor and humbling to receive this award named after David Carliner and be here with so many lawyers and advocates fighting for justice. I owe such gratitude to ACS and the Carliner family, and to Leah Littman and Mike Wishney for supporting my nomination and work. Mostly, though, I'm grateful for all of my colleagues at Rights Behind Bars, many of whom are sitting over there. Who work with me and with our clients every day to struggle against inhumane conditions of confinement and the American prison system. I couldn't ask for a better team. Fair warning before I dive in, I'm a lawyer for people in prisons, facing unspeakable abuses, and in litigating prison cases, we fight against some of the highest explicit and implicit barriers in the legal system. Rules and norms established to keep people in prison out of the courts and out of the light. So this might be a bit depressing, but I also promise that I'll bring some hope as well. When I talk to some of my family about what I do, they always have two questions. First, they ask if I'm aware that there are some lawyers that work places where they make a lot of money, and question why I work somewhere called a nonprofit. Then they ask a more fundamental question. What is it that you do again? And so I say, I'm a lawyer and I sue prisons. And those are the things that I want to talk about today. Prisons, how they exist and function in the current system, and what I've learned over a decade of working with people inside, and lawyers and the role that we play in building and continuing the current incarceration crisis that's plaguing communities across the country. Even after so many years working with clients in prisons, I still find it difficult to convey what it means to be in a prison. For our clients, it means a change to almost every aspect of their lives. They're stripped of their freedom and everything that that word entails. They often lose their homes, their jobs, their cars, their pets. Often they lose their family as well, whether through formal termination of parental rights or through the myriad ways that prisons cut off communication between spouses and partners, parents and children, often forcing people to go decades without an in-person visit, let alone a hug or dinner with family. Inside, people are subjected to what can only be and has been defined as torture. The abuses we see at Rights Behind Bars run the gamut. From Mr. Taylor, who was forced to lie naked in a putrid feces-covered cell for 6 days, or Mr. An, who was placed in solitary confinement in a private immigration detention facility and allowed to die by suicide, or the hundreds of people who are denied available medical care every single day, or Mr. Durham, who simply wanted a cane so that he could walk around his New Jersey facility and was told, no, you don't get a cane because you're too annoying. This isn't even to mention the labor that people in prisons have forced upon them without consent and without pay. Slavery in both name and definition. We have clients in Missouri forced to make furniture and bedding, in Louisiana forced to pick okra in the hot sun, and in Massachusetts forced to make license plates for the cars that drive by their facility every single day. Every day doing this job is learning about a new indignity, like the fact that prisons and jails charge people rent for the privilege of being forcibly incarcerated there, or that Virginia still uses attack dogs in its DOC facilities, or that in St. Louis, now that the jail where guards staged gladiator fights is closed, our clients are forced into the jail where they're indiscriminately maced and deprived of water as punishment. It's learning about people like our client, Miss Edwards, who was pregnant in a North Carolina facility and shackled while in labor, and then taken off of necessary medication postpartum because there was no longer concern for the fetus, just for her. And it's learning about the women in FCI Dublin, dozens of whom have been sexually assaulted by federal guards and yet are still denied even things like compassionate release or available immigration relief from this administration's Bureau of Prisons and Department of Justice. The central thing here is that these cases actually aren't unique. Abuses like this happen every single day in prisons and jails across the country. They are commonplace. We could have 1,000 attorneys at Rights Behind Bars and still not be able to litigate every case that comes in the door. And that, the sheer regularity of it all, is perhaps the most troubling thing. Now, of course, there are bright spots. The work couldn't be done without them. Human beings find so many ways to thrive in even the harshest conditions. For me, I've been able to develop meaningful, long-lasting relationships with people inside. We've laughed and cried, we've built trust and fought back against injustices big and small. We've won amazing victories against the longest odds. Because if there's one good thing about repression, it's that it breeds resistance. Dostoevsky wrote that the degree of civilization in a society can be judged by entering its prisons. Unfortunately, over my time working with people in jails, prisons, and immigration detention facilities, I've come to the unavoidable conclusion that we've constructed a horror that's immoral at its core, and that the stain of our prison system has made our whole society worse off. To me, this conclusion is inescapable for any observer of our prison system. The response is that, of course, prisons are bad, very bad maybe, and we should curb some of the worst abuses. But we need prisons. Prisons keep us safe. But unfortunately, this too isn't true. Even if you didn't think that prisons, the abuses I described as inherent to the prison system, were immoral, it should be very troubling that we're doing all of this in the name of security, but receiving none. There's little evidence that prisons make us safer, and in fact, everything points to the opposite conclusion. The United States incarcerates more people than any nation in the world. We spend the most money on prisons, hundreds of billions of dollars. You would think, as a result, we would be the safest country in the world, but we aren't. And it's no mystery why. We all agree we need a safe society, but we continue to invest in solutions that exacerbate the problem, and it's quite literally killing us. A recent Prison Policy Institute report demonstrated that a year in prison takes 2 years off of a person's life expectancy, and that as a result of the sheer number of people we incarcerate, the United States average life expectancy has dropped dramatically. All this is particularly strange when we know the things that do create safety. Things like education, housing, mental and physical health services, access to good food and clean water, meaningful community connections. But instead, rather than dealing with those problems head on and investing in those solutions, we choose to warehouse people in prisons that not only do not address real security concerns, but actually create violence. Prisons are often violent places. It's just violence we can't see. It doesn't make the news. And there's the violence that prisons create for people when they get out. People are subjected to extreme trauma and then shuffled out with limitations to their housing and their job prospects and expected to manage the mental health issues often gifted them by prisons. Prisons do not help rehabilitate people. They're not designed for that. Anyone who's been in a prison can tell you as a practical matter, people can't heal there. Instead, prisons are there to punish. They're the punishment we've devised for poverty, for race, for nonconformity, and for disability. Just ask our clients. Just ask our clients, like Mr. Folks, who was charged with a felony, because he had mental health issues that caused him to harm himself one day in a Louisiana parish jail. You heard that right. He was charged with a felony. In Louisiana, it's a felony to harm yourself in a jail or prison. It's called felony self-mutilation of a prisoner. And while not every state makes that a crime, every Department of Correction punishes such manifestations of mental health issues with some form of prison discipline. Prisons, as a result, prevent healing and ensure violence. They sap resources from better equipped alternatives. The question then is, if prisons are so bad, if they're so harmful to the people inside and their families, and so bad at doing what they're nominally designed for, how did we get here? How have we built a prison system that is larger and more costly than any in the world? One troubling answer has emerged to me time and time again over the course of learning about prisons, representing clients, and advocating for change. The answer, unfortunately, is us, lawyers. Lawyers have built the foundation and structure that populates, maintains, and protects the American prison system. It is lawyers who every single day in courtrooms across America ask judges to confine people in jail pre-trial and then to imprison them for decades. It is lawyers who wrote the statutes determining why one thing should be criminalized and one thing should not. It's lawyers who wrote statutes like the Prison Litigation Reform Act, which determined that in the name of docket control, people in prison should be systematically barred from using the courts like everyone else. It's lawyers who every day defend the prisons, jails, and immigration detention centers who commit the atrocities that I spoke about just a second ago. Every time a guard assaults someone or a prison denies a mobility-impaired person a cane, there's a lawyer there saying, it wasn't that bad. And even if it was, that person shouldn't be able to sue for it. It's impossible to capture for people who do not see it every day, but the aggregate of all of these words from all of these lawyers is this: untold injustices continue to happen every day, and a system no reasonable human could begin to justify is called justice. Now you might say, this is how our system works. It's just how it is. But lawyers, just like any other profession, are responsible for what we do. Perhaps more so because of the power that we wield. We're responsible for the justice of the causes we choose to champion. Systems don't arise out of nothing. They're built every day on every decision we make, and no decision is neutral. The aggregate decisions of the legal profession up to this point have tacked strongly one way, in favor of staggering harm, in favor of punishment over empathy, prisons over people. But, and here's the hope I promised, it doesn't need to be that way. Just as we've been the architects of this system, we can be the architects of building a better world. That's what so many people in this room do every single day. They fight with their clients to eke a little more justice out of the world. And it's that lead that we should all follow, organize together in service of building something better rather than tinkering around the edges of something that's never worked. By and large, lawyers aren't treating the horrors of prisons as an emergency. We aren't organizing against it, but we can. We can come together in every office and every courtroom and state legislators and in Congress and press on this as the emergency that it is. We can do vital work to inform the public of the gap between our ideals and our realities. At Rights Behind Bars, we have a particular way of doing our work. We've seen the great work that's come before us from people like David Carliner and some of the places that we've come up short. And we want to forge a new path with familiar tools. Our work puts a premium on ensuring that it is a just world that we are building. To that end, we lawyer with social movements, inside and out, who are seeking to create a safe and just society. At its core, this type of lawyering, what we now call movement lawyering, is concerned with power. Who has it and who doesn't, and for our work, shifting power to movements fighting against our prisons, jails, and immigration detention centers. We view law as only one tool to assist in this fight. And this is vital, because change often comes only from a confluence of pressures, inside and outside of courts, building up to something more. We can't view law as the only vehicle for social change, because it is and it always has been social movements that lead the way. Everyone in this room knows too well that legal victories are hard to come by, especially in these courts. But that even if we win, it's even harder to see those legal victories actualized into real-world change. In practice, this means learning a very hard lesson, that everything we want won't come out of a perfectly crafted complaint or oral argument. But we wouldn't want it to. It will instead come from long-term, sustained, and deeply democratic struggle. It's that leads to long-term sustainable victories that really shift power. And committed lawyers are a vital part of that struggle. At Rights Behind Bars, we're trying to be those lawyers, and I want to thank everyone here for this award and for joining us in being those lawyers. Thank you.